I thought I knew how life worked. I had my routines, my little certainties, the things I believed would carry me safely through every day. I had a job that paid the bills, friends I trusted, and people who promised they would always be there. I thought I understood the rules, the patterns, the way doors opened and closed in life. But then, almost quietly, almost without warning, everything I relied on began to shift. The doors I had counted on, the ones I had walked through 1,000 times without fear, started closing around me. And it wasn't sudden in the dramatic way you might expect. It was quiet, subtle. Each closure was like a soft click, almost inaudible, but with consequences I could feel in every part of me. I tried to resist. I tried to fight it. I knocked on the doors I had trusted for years, shaking the frames, demanding they open again. But they stayed shut. Faces I counted on to be constant changed. Opportunities I thought were secure vanished. And somewhere between frustration and confusion, a new feeling settled over me, a heavy, relentless uncertainty. For the first time, I realized that the life I had built, the walls I had leaned on, the comfort I had clung to, they were no longer enough. It was in that space, in that quiet chaos, that I began to notice something else. The closures, as painful as they weren't just endings. They were signals, subtle and impossible to ignore. They were messages I couldn't read yet, but I could sense their presence, guiding me toward a path I had never imagined. I would soon learn that when some doors close, it isn't because you failed. It isn't punishment. It's a shift, a turning point. A moment designed to test whether you were ready to move, to leave behind everything familiar, to step into a life that could only exist once the old one was gone. I had to let go. Not all at once, not cleanly, and not without fear. Every step forward felt uncertain. Every choice seemed fragile. But the more doors closed, the more I understood, these endings were not endings at all. They were the beginning of something I couldn't yet see, something I would later realize was essential to who I was becoming. And in the quiet of that realization, I understood the truth I had been avoiding all along. Some doors must close, and when they do, you don't just survive, you grow in ways you never thought possible. Stay with me. What I'm about to tell you will show you how losing what you hold closest can push you further than anything you ever imagined. I had a life that, on the surface, looked perfect. Every morning followed the same rhythm. The alarm would go off, I would prepare for work, and the streets I walked were familiar, comfortable, the kind of streets that made you feel like you had lived here your whole life. I had a job that gave me stability, one that offered respect even if it didn't ignite passion. I had colleagues I smiled at, friends I met for coffee, dinners planned on weekends, and a circle of people I trusted, or at least, I thought I did. My apartment was quiet but cozy, filled with the things that made a house feel like home. On the walls were photos of laughter, little tokens of trips, souvenirs of moments I could look at and feel that life was going exactly as it should. And yet, in the quiet moments between routines, a restlessness would creep in. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It was a subtle, gnawing feeling that grew stronger every time I paused to think about my life. I found myself staring out of the same window, watching people rush past, wondering if they felt the same. Was this everything? Was this all I would ever know? I had a career, yes, but it didn't excite me anymore. I had friendships, yes, but sometimes they felt like obligations rather than connections. I had stability, but somewhere deep inside, a whisper kept asking, is this it? I remember evenings when I would sit on my couch, glass of water in hand, and try to trace the pattern of my life. It all seemed so neat, so structured. Yet, behind that neatness was a tension I couldn't ignore. Dreams I had once held close now felt distant, tucked away behind responsibilities and habits I had allowed to take over. I wanted to move, to change, to grow, but the fear of leaving what I had built held me in place. The comfort of familiarity was heavy, almost as if it had weight, and I carried it without noticing how much it restricted me. Even the people around me didn't see it. To them, I was fine. To them, I had achieved what most would consider success. They didn't notice the way I lingered at my desk, staring at the clock, imagining a life that was just out of reach. They didn't hear the quiet sighs I let escape when I thought no one was listening. I began to feel like a character trapped in a story I hadn't written, like I was living someone else's script while my own remained unwritten. And so, every day became a balancing act: smile, nod, participate, repeat. But the underlying tension grew stronger. Every closed door, every routine repeated, felt like a reminder that maybe, somewhere, there was a door I hadn't opened yet, a door that might finally lead me to the life I was meant to live. Something felt off. Something was waiting. I just didn't know where to find it, or whether I would recognize it if I did. Little did I know, life had already started moving those doors, one by one, and the lessons they would bring were about to begin in ways I could never imagine. The first door didn't close with warning. It happened on a morning that looked like every other morning. I woke up, dressed the same way, walked the same familiar route to the office, greeted the same receptionist I greeted every day. Nothing in the air suggested that anything was about to change. But the moment I stepped into the building, I could feel it, not in something anyone said, but in the way people looked at me. Eyes shifted. Conversations paused. There was a stiffness I couldn't place, like everyone knew something I did not. I sat at my desk and tried to begin my day, but before I could even open my laptop, I was asked to come in for a quick discussion. The kind of phrase that makes your stomach tighten without knowing why. I followed them into a room I had sat in many times before, but this time the air felt different. The meeting was short, brutally simple. My position had been removed. Not for misconduct, not for incompetence, not even for poor performance, simply gone. A restructuring decision. A quiet erasure of years of effort with a few sentences delivered in a calm, polite tone by people who didn't meet my eyes for more than a second. I tried to speak. I tried to ask questions. I tried to understand. I reminded them of my projects, my results, my commitment, my deadlines. But every sentence I offered dissolved into the same reply: the decision was finalized. There was nothing to discuss. A door I had walked through every day, a door I believed I had earned the right to hold open, was shut in a single moment without emotion, without ceremony, without warning. The strange thing is, I didn't feel anger at first. I felt disbelief. I walked out of the meeting room on legs that didn't feel like mine. The office I had known for years suddenly felt foreign. The people at their desks, typing, laughing, answering phones, looked as though they belonged to a world I was no longer part of. I gathered my things in silence. No one said anything. No one stood up. The same people who once came to my desk for help avoided eye contact. It was as if the moment the door closed, I ceased to exist. Outside the building, the noise of traffic and footsteps sounded louder than usual. I stood on the sidewalk and realized I had nowhere to go next. For the first time in years, my day had no shape, no plan, no direction. I remember looking down at my hands, as if they might hold some kind of answer, but they were empty, just like my future in that moment. At home that evening, the silence felt heavier than ever. I replayed the conversation in my head, word for word, trying to find a clue, a mistake, something I had missed. I even drafted an email, a plea for reconsideration, but never sent it. Deep down, I already knew the truth: the door was closed. Completely. No amount of knocking would change that. And yet, beneath the shock and confusion, a second, quieter realization started to surface. When I tried to push away but couldn't fully erase, maybe this wasn't just an ending. Maybe it was the beginning of something that would only make sense much later. But at that point, all I could feel was the weight of loss, and the hollow emptiness that comes with being forced out of a life you weren't done living. Losing the job was only the first door. I thought I could recover, regroup, find something else quickly. I told myself it was just a temporary disruption. But the days turned into weeks, and every attempt to move forward met resistance. Applications went unanswered. Interviews ended with polite emptiness. Promises turned into silence. It felt as though the world had stepped back from me without explanation. And the people I expected to lean on were not there the way I imagined they would be. Friends who once called regularly slowly disappeared into their own lives. At first, their absence had excuses: "I've been busy, we'll talk soon, let's plan something next week." But those next weeks never arrived. Texts I sent were seen but not answered. Calls rang without return. The people I thought I could rely on simply faded out, not with harsh words but with quiet distance. That type of loss is sharp, not because of what is said, but because of what is no longer said. I tried channeling my energy into a personal project, something I believed could create a new path. I worked on it late into the night, convinced that if I focused, if I put in the effort, something would open. But just when I thought it was gaining traction, one detail collapsed the entire structure. The idea slipped away, leaving behind wasted hours and another closed door. I remember sitting in front of the screen, whispering to myself, I thought I could fix this, but every door I tried kept shutting right in front of me. The consequences began to bleed into other parts of my life. Savings drained. Bills piled up. The weight of stopped income settled into everything: food choices, sleep, decisions. Even my body began to react. I woke up with headaches that sat behind my eyes like a stone. My chest tightened often, not from exertion, but from something deeper, the strain of uncertainty. Nights stretched into long hours of staring at the ceiling, mind racing through questions with no answers. One afternoon, I tried to reach the one friend I believed above all others would never disappear. I needed to speak to someone who knew me before all of this. Someone who could say something grounding. Instead, the voice on the other end was cold, disconnected, rehearsed. I'm sorry you're going through this, but I can't be involved right now. I have my own life to handle. The sentence landed like a blow. That was when the truth became clear. I was not only losing jobs and chances, I was losing people I once built my world around. Every door I touched seemed determined to stay shut: work, friendships, projects, stability, plans, even the quiet confidence I used to carry. The life I recognized was dissolving piece by piece, leaving me to stand inside a space that no longer felt like mine. And every time I tried to push forward, another part of the life I knew slipped out of reach. This was no longer just a setback. It was a dismantling, slow, deliberate, complete. I spent those days in silence. Not because I wanted peace, but because my body had shut down from thinking, from trying, from holding on. I didn't answer messages. I didn't leave the apartment. I sat with everything I had lost piled up in my head, one memory at a time, like a list I didn't choose to write. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Why does it feel like every part of my life collapsed at once? And the more I asked, the more it hurt, because I had no answer. At first, I convinced myself it had to be my fault. Maybe I stayed too long. Maybe I missed the warning signs. Maybe I trusted the wrong people. Maybe I didn't try hard enough. I replayed conversations word for word, decisions frame by frame, as if I could go back and change any of them. I couldn't. But then something unexpected happened, not outside, but inside me. It didn't come with noise or drama. It came like a slow realization I had been running from. Instead of asking, why did everything end? A different question rose up. What was all of this trying to remove me from? It didn't sound like defeat, it sounded like direction. I remembered something a former mentor once told me years ago when I ignored it. Greater than, life will not drag dead things with you into your future. If you won't release them, they will be taken from you. And suddenly the pattern made sense. The job ended, because I had outgrown it but stayed anyway. The friend drifted, because loyalty had replaced honesty. The side project failed, because I was building it on fear, not conviction. The comfort left, because growth cannot happen where nothing moves. For the first time, instead of blaming myself, I paused and let one truth sink in fully. I wasn't being punished, I was being cleared. Not because I deserved loss, but because I was refusing change. And that is when the realization hit me with full weight: the closed doors were not the problem. The real problem was that I kept trying to force myself back into rooms I had already outgrown. The turning point didn't come with applause or any sign that looked like success. It came in the quiet, in that moment when I finally stopped arguing with reality and let the old version of my life die. From that stillness, something new began to move. At first, I took tiny steps. I opened my laptop again, not to search for what I lost, but to search for what I had never allowed myself to consider. I looked into fields I once ignored because I thought they were too different, or, not for someone like me. I read opportunities with a new mind, not a fearful one. For the first time, I didn't ask, does this match who I was? I asked, what if this is who I'm becoming? Then came the breakthrough. I attended a virtual seminar, almost by accident. A speaker shared a story that mirrored mine, about losing everything and finding a new path, not by chance but by force of surrender. His words landed like they were addressed to me alone. Greater than, your next chapter cannot begin if you are still worshipping the last one. That sentence cracked something open in me. The same day, I received an email, a response from someone I had reached out to weeks earlier when desperation pushed me to try something different. They wanted to interview me for a role I never would have applied for if my old life was still intact. Everything in me hesitated. It was unfamiliar territory. It required skills I hadn't fully mastered. It meant starting again from the bottom. It meant risk. But then a far deeper fear rose up, the fear of staying where nothing was left. So I said yes. The day I walked into that new environment, I felt it, a rush inside me I hadn't felt in years. Not comfort, not certainty, something better, aliveness. I looked around that room, at the people, the energy, the possibility, and I realized something unmistakable. Nothing I lost was a loss, it was extraction. Anything that truly belonged to my future would never have needed force to stay. And as the weeks passed, the proof became clearer. I started growing again. I started meeting people who reflected the person I was becoming, not the version I had outgrown. I found myself excited about work again, not drained, not tolerated, not surviving, alive. That's when the truth hit me with full weight. Every closed door had been an answer to a prayer I didn't know I made. I had asked for growth, for purpose, for a bigger life, and the only way to receive it was to remove the life that kept me small. I did not lose security, I lost the walls that confined me. I did not lose people, I lost placeholders. I did not lose direction, I lost distractions. The very doors I cried over were the doors that would have trapped me. And the door I feared the most, the unknown, became the doorway to everything I didn't know I needed. What came after was not instant happiness, it was slow reconstruction. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but shows up quietly through small shifts in how you think, how you move, how you breathe through life. I started noticing the difference first in my reactions. The things that used to break me no longer held the same power. I didn't chase people who left. I didn't beg opportunities to return. I didn't sit outside locked doors waiting for someone to open them again out of pity. Something in me had accepted that if it requires force to remain, it was never meant to stay. That acceptance became freedom. With time, my life began to reflect that inner change. New spaces opened, slowly. New people appeared, the kind who spoke possibility instead of limitation, who didn't shrink when I grew, who didn't require me to remain small to keep their comfort intact. Conversations felt different, they weren't about survival anymore, they were about becoming. Work felt different too. I wasn't functioning on autopilot or simply collecting routines to feel useful, I was building, learning, expanding. I no longer woke up with dread or exhaustion from trying to maintain a life that no longer fit. I woke up with a sense of forward motion, even on uncertain days. But the biggest consequence wasn't the new job, new chapter, or new direction, it was the clarity. Clarity that nothing was taken from me without purpose. Clarity that endings aren't punishments, they are edits. Clarity that growth doesn't coexist with what refuses to evolve. Now, when something exits my life, I don't see it as a threat. I see it as a clearing. A clearing for something aligned, something necessary, something that would have never arrived if I kept clinging to what was. I learned that the most painful transitions are often the most precise ones, they remove exactly what cannot travel with you. They feel like destruction only until you see what was being protected in the process. So I no longer ask for doors to stay open. I ask for the courage to walk away when they close. Because the life I am living now, the one built after those closures, is proof that nothing meant for me required me to fight to keep it. If I had forced those old doors to remain, I would still be living a smaller life, surrounded by people who only knew a smaller version of me, doing work that only served the smaller chapters of who I used to be. Instead, I was pushed toward the unknown, and the unknown is where I found myself. That is the consequence of closed doors. You don't just lose what you outgrew. You meet the person you were always meant to become. Before this video ends, I want you to pause, not to listen to me, but to look back at your own story. Think carefully. What was the door that closed in your life? Was it a job you thought would last forever? A relationship you swore would never end? A plan that you were certain was the one, until it collapsed right in front of you? Everyone has that moment, the one that felt like destruction when it happened. Maybe you cried over it. Maybe you prayed to get it back. Maybe you blamed yourself for not holding it together. But now that time has passed, did you begin to see it differently? Have you ever realized, even years later, that what felt like the worst ending was actually the only reason you are where you are now? I want you to talk to me. Not because comments help the video, but because your story matters. Someone else may read your comment and realize they are not alone in their collapse. Your voice might be the thing that helps another person understand their own closed doors. Write it below, in your own words, even if it still feels unresolved. Have you ever had a door close on you, and then discovered later that it was the best thing that could have happened? Tell your story. Tell your moment. Tell the part that still hurts and the part that finally made sense, or the part that is still in the dark. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you that closures are not curses but corrections, then don't leave without doing 3 things. 1. Like this video, not for numbers, but because this message needs to reach someone who is currently at their breaking point. 2. Subscribe, so you don't miss the stories that will follow. This is not just a one-time video, it is a series of lessons born from real endings and real transformations. 3. Share it, send it to someone who is crying over a closed door right now and thinks their life is over. You might become the reason they hold on a little longer. And this is not where the journey stops. In the next story, I will take you into a chapter I never thought I would speak about, how my deepest heartbreak, the one that felt like it ripped my life apart, became the exact event that reshaped my destiny and rebuilt my sense of self from nothing. If you think this one was powerful, the next one will show you what happens when the door that breaks you is the same door that frees you. So stay here, comment below, share your truth, and be here for the next chapter, because your closed door might finally make sense when you hear it.